Meanwhile, they've lost Ted Cruz, who is nothing, okay, and is ultimately meaningless. Ted Cruz is a meaningless figure. He is a coward and a charlatan. Instead, I'm going to be talking to another Texas politician who I actually do like. His name is Greg Casar. Here it is. Hold on. Start virtual camera. Turn on the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully we have Greg Casar in the building. Let's see if we actually do. He hasn't. Okay. Oh, nope. Hello?
Other way.
You wanna put your camera sideways? You wanna put your phone sideways? Oh, almost.
I got it. Can you see me okay?
No, it's still vertical. You wanna turn it sideways?
Put this thing away like this way.
Yeah, there it is. Perfect. All right, we got Congressperson Greg Casar in the building. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. This is very interesting times to have you on. I have a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, man, I got a lot of thoughts and questions too. It feels like every day it's an interesting and bad day, but yeah, looking forward to talking.
Yeah. Last time you were here, I was hoping that you would become the next leader of the Progressive Caucus, and since then it has happened. And it's very exciting times, I guess, because there is some momentum building up right now within the Democratic Party. There's a couple different planks, I would say, in the Democratic Party. It seems like you got the abundance mindset people on the one hand, but then you have the populist left on the other, with Bernie Sanders, AOC, yourself included in this. In the big tent, not to say that these guys are fighting against one another, but instead it seems like there is a little bit of a party restructuring that's taking place, and I do hope, and this is my assessment, you don't have to agree with this or not, I do hope that the populist left will win out in this process because I feel like it's the last hope for America to not completely collapse on its own contradictions.
Well, I'm really happy to talk about that. So let's do it.
All right. What do you think about that then?
What do I think about that baseline proposition? Well, I think you are right about a few. I think, to me, very clearly right about a few parts of this. One, the Democratic Party loss in November was devastating for the world, and Trump being elected obviously has led to daily horrible abuses. But right when that happened, there was immediately a big debate about whether this was a big deal of a loss or not. And, I went back to Washington, D.C. from Texas, and there were folks who were saying, hey, this wasn't so bad. The Dems didn't lose by very much. And there were those of us who said, no, this is devastating. Losing working class voters in this way over the course of the last decade plus destroys the entire purpose of the party, undermines the entire philosophy of the party. We might as well pack up and just go home and go the way of the Whig Party if we can't solve that. And first, there was that debate, whether this was a big deal. And that argument in some ways has been won by those folks of all wings of the party who thought this was really bad, because now there's actually people who agree, no matter where they stand on centrist versus left or populist versus technocratic. They say, yeah, we've been losing working class voters and we got to fix that. So people have acknowledged the collapse. The only hope in that is it seems like everybody's willing to go and work on the problem. And then what you've pointed out is now different people are coming up with their different ways of saying, well, what should the politics of the party be? And I think just the other day, after this Wisconsin Supreme Court election that Democrats so overwhelmingly won by rightfully targeting Musk's pillaging not just of our economy, but of our government, I think the anti-oligarchy political argument has really started winning the day there too, because it wasn't very long ago. And I'd be interested, folks watching at home, you should Google it. There were a lot of articles written in November, December, January about certain Democrats worrying whether punching Musk was good politics or not. They were saying, oh, this might backfire on us. We should be talking about how somebody making gajillions of dollars is a good thing. That's aspirational. No, most people don't think a billionaire should be buying the government and running the economy. And I think we're starting to win that argument too. But happy to keep talking about that. But my assessment is that was a real debate. It's not done, but actually the forces of people who say we can build a big tent by being a populist working people's party. I haven't seen this much success in a while. Of course, it's under really dire circumstances.
Yeah. I think a part of that initiative also, a part of that movement also needs to come with like real tangible changes being made in ways that the American population can see and comprehend. And I think that starts off with not instantly running to Silicon Valley tech CEOs and the remainder that still support the Democratic Party and saying, no, 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 we're going to give you unfettered access as well once we come back to power. Please don't remove your donations. Please don't remove us from the donation list. But instead to say, no, this country is not run by oligarchs. This country is not run by the incredibly wealthy, and maybe repackaging it, not even with the terms oligarchs, but by simple corruption. Because Trump did something that I consider to be expert level messaging, where he just said he's going to drain the swamp. That was a lie. He is a swamp monster himself, but it was at its face something that we see in Latin American countries quite a bit, as a matter of fact, anti-corruption messaging. And I think that the Democrats could also engage in anti-corruption messaging, but it's not just about saying that you're anti-corruption. You have to also show that you're anti-corruption, because the Republican Party's retort always is, well, you have billionaires on your side too, and it's all the woke ones, and they're gay and bad or whatever, right? So I think that there is definitely some more movement that needs to happen in the Democratic Party on that front. But I do
We have
feel
big openings to do it now. I mean,
Yeah.
part of what I hope we can do is right now, when there's all this energy against corruption, let's go and ask folks to get on the bills to ban congressional stock trading, to permanently get big money out of politics, to end gerrymandering. And I think there's more energy towards that than any other time that I've been paying attention here to congressional politics. The energy has been there, of course, for years, but I
Yeah.
feel like there's an opening for us to do it right now. I was at this rally in Tucson with Bernie and AOC. We were told there were going to be about 2,000 people in a high school gym. 23,000 people showed up. They took over the entire football field. It was the biggest rally in Arizona history. And there were a lot of folks there who said, look, I wasn't with Bernie 10 years ago, but damn, he's been right this entire time. Before, when he was talking about billionaires running the show behind the curtain, I wasn't so sure. But now they're out here in public bragging about it and running cabinet meetings. And so there's a real opening, I think, where the voters are going to go towards the people who say that breaking the unholy alliance between corporate greed and corrupt government should be like the central project of whatever the good party is. And I hope that the Democratic Party transforms and goes and fills that void.
Yeah. In the interim, however, in the short term, I think, in order to offer America a stay of execution, the Democrats have a lot more that they must do in order to claw back confidence from the American public. And I think a part of that is also engaging in obstructionist policies. I will admit that one of the most united messages that I hear from the Democratic caucus overall is specifically on issues that are not exactly top of mind for many Americans, issues that they don't really care about, whether it be restoring U.S. aid funding. Now, we can argue about whether or not U.S. aid is a necessary force, but that's not what I'm talking about. To me, I think Americans see U.S. aid in the same way that they see NATO, something that Biden is talking about. It's foreign policy. It's not related directly to their pockets, even if it does have a lot of good, right? I think on the messaging front, it seems like the caucus, the Democratic Party, uniting on those issues rather than issues that directly pertain to their civil liberties being taken away, I feel like is a moment that they are that they're missing out on doing messaging on, not focusing on austerity and how damaging austerity is, and mass layoffs at the federal level as much, I think is also another one. And you can do that around the anti-Elon sentiment as well, because he is seen as the figurehead for this initiative.
Well, and here's an interesting point where I think, I'm even though I'm weird and I'm in Congress and we're all just sort of humans and we pick up messages in a certain kind of way. And I think that what you just described, even though you watch Congress and politics really close, is really interesting because technically the united message that we hear all the time, that I hear every day in the halls of Congress is defend Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But even what you hear most loudly is something like USAID. Why? You ask yourself why. And the answer to me, tell me if you disagree, but I think it's because there's such a strong, clear contrast between the Republican position and the Democratic position that it stands out in your mind. Doesn't matter if they said Social Security 10 times, if the Democrats said Social Security 10 times and USAID once, you hear the USAID one louder because there's such a clear difference between the two parties. And I think this is where sometimes the Democratic Party, not just sometimes, I think a lot of times why the Democratic Party message falls flat, because we think, let's just say defend Social Security, it polls like bananas, polls at 90%, but nobody hears it. Why? Because it's boring. Republicans also say defend Social Security. If we talked about expanding it, making it so that no senior had to live in poverty ever again, increasing the payments way past cost of living by making it so that people that make over $400,000 a year have to actually pay into Social Security past $400,000, and there was some controversy around it, then it'd be a message. But right now, what I'll tell you is if you say what you just said to the leaders in the party, of which I'm sort of becoming one, I guess, in its own way as the Progressive Caucus chair, they'd say, Hasan, no, our message is on Social Security. And you'd be like, well, I don't know. And we'd show you 10,000 press releases that fell in the forest, but nobody heard them. And part of it is we need a stronger contrast with Republicans, be willing enough to engage in controversy so that people notice what the hell comes out of our mouth. And and people notice on USAID because Trump got rid of it. And we're saying, hey, this might starve like lots of kids that don't need starving. And there's controversy. So people know the difference between the two parties. We say defend Social Security. They say defend Social Security. Of course, we know they're trying to gut it, but the message is so similar that it gets washed out in the whole mess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's exactly what I want out of Democratic leadership in general, which is to move the reactionary forces within the Republican Party in the direction where they dominate the conversation and not play catch up against whatever the domineering Republican narrative is. And I think while clearly Cory Booker doing the record-breaking filibuster, even though it was not directional against like any sort of bill that was passing, is a good start on this process. I think even in that process, even within that initiative, in an effort to dominate the conversation, because that's what his comms team said, if your message still falls flat to a certain degree because it doesn't have like a bold progressive agenda associated with it, attached to it, of like what the Democrats stand for, the Republican Party will move on from that, and it'll be all but an afterthought. Now, going back to what you just said, though, as far as like drawing a line of demarcation between your ideological enemies and the ideological enemies of the American working class, I think there are plenty of standout issues where the Democratic Party could actually separate itself directly through messaging discipline. One of those instances is on immigration. This is an issue that you and I align on almost entirely, and yet I have seen very little conversations coming from the top Democratic leadership in Congress. And I think that there needs to be significantly more organizing on this, and the Democrats should stop being fearful of all the polls that they see that show 60% of Americans love, random Venezuelan barbers being shipped off to El Salvador. Like, they should stop focusing on that and instead have a message that is dictated by empathy and morality, and start leading rather than following the Republican example.
Well, here's a place where I think we have a lot to learn from just 7 years ago. Remember, immigration during the last Trump administration was an offense issue for the Democrats, not a defense one.
Yeah.
Because of course, if you tell American voters in an anxious moment where we aren't picking Wall Street CEOs as the villains, hey, things are screwed up, and if somebody's breaking the law, you have a problem with them, especially as folks report that they're feeling less safe in their own communities, then yeah, you're going to wind up with some of the poll numbers you see. But if you go and tell folks they're taking law enforcement resources that are supposed to keep you safe, and like you said, sending a barber to a foreign torture camp, I mean, that's not something that folks support. And I think that if we can lead with empathy, but where I would learn from the last time around with the first Trump administration is also tell people how this doesn't actually make you more safe, then I think we can make this an offense issue too. But we shouldn't lose that second part, because due process isn't just an idealistic thing. It's to protect your safety
Yeah.
and your family's safety. As soon as somebody can get bagged by a completely like a cop in a hoodie who is legally like a student who is legally present here can get bagged by a cop in a hoodie for their political opinions. I mean, that's just like not a country that people want to live in. It's not the country that they imagine the United States to be. And we've got to figure out how to get back on offense on immigration, because immigration is going to keep happening in this country, and we can't let the right wing forever have that as an issue.
And it's not just offense on immigration as well, because this ties back to a severe, perhaps the most significant violation of First Amendment protections on U.S. soil up until this very moment. Only in like historic moments of like war or during the McCarthyist trial period, during the most heated moments of the Red Scare, did we have this level of erosion over the First Amendment. And it's happening at the behest of a foreign nation, which I think is something that the Democrats could stress, but I don't think that they will. And it kind of goes back to the same fissure or the same lack of interest in both leading by example and the lack of interest in like listening to really loud majorities within the base when it comes to Israel. I think this is, people get very scared when the subject matter comes up. Like Democratic representatives, Democratic politicians get very scared to make bold declarative statements about this issue, with some notable exceptions. But I think it's one that genuinely would win a lot of favor from the base of the Democratic Party and independents as well. This is the one area where they never look at polls. They look at polls when it comes to immigration, but for some reason, Democrats never look at the polls on this key issue where the overwhelming majority of the population wants a ceasefire. And now they could be polarizing the base and galvanizing the base against Donald Trump, who has continued and accelerated the violence that Palestinians are subjected to with our tax-paying dollars, and is using Israel, and even worse than that, using Judaism falsely with this conflation to black bag people for the crime of exercising their free speech. It's completely un-American. It's completely unacceptable.
I'm continue to be disappointed with the small number of votes that we can get to stop sending bombs to Netanyahu, who just said the other day openly that he is keeping the Trump plan on the table of ethnic cleansing of Gaza. So it's just unacceptable. It should be unacceptable to anybody. What Netanyahu continues to say he's pursuing over there. And then on the free speech issue, I think that people that disagree with you or me on what is happening to folks in Palestine should still be speaking out on free speech. In fact, I think that it's really important for progressives when we see the free speech right trampled of somebody with right-wing views to say, no, somebody should also be able to express their right-wing views or their left-wing views or their popular views or their unpopular views. And like you said, this is something that connects with our base of voters. But honestly, there's a lot of people that are independent and conservative where protection of free speech rights is deeply important to them too. And again, when I think about how we learn from the wave of organizing energy 7 and 8 years ago, I'll be honest, I was always pretty uncomfortable with how there were moments in that period of time where we where there were progressives that wanted to shut down, like even right-wing speakers at a school. Look, you can embarrass them, you can point out that they're hypocrites, but I think actually we should promote more and more speech, because it never works out for dissidents and creative people and progressives and workers for the state to be able to stop speech. It just never works out the right way. And free speech, I think, is just sort of should be a core value for any populist movement, in my view. Just for viewers at home, I think if you want to look up the right way of dealing with this, a few decades ago in Austin, where I'm sitting right now, the KKK was setting up to do a march. It was going to be a few dozen maniacs. And activists went and asked the mayor to pull the permit and not let them march. And the mayor, I think, did the right thing. He let them have the permit. The 3 dozen freaking wackos were marching up Congress Avenue in downtown. And then 200 Austinites showed up, lined the street. And as the KKK marched through, they turned around, pulled their pants down and mooned them and humiliated them as they walked up the road. And I feel like it's that kind of a spirit that's more of the American spirit that I think would actually really behoove us as a Democratic Party to embrace.
Yeah, look, the debate over protecting the First Amendment, I think, is better served when had over the boundaries of the actual erosions that are taking place. Your state, the state of Texas, has some rigorous applications of boycott, divestment, and sanctions laws that are in direct violation of the First Amendment.
They fired. I think she was a speech therapist. Here in Eastern Travis County, because she refused to sign a statement saying that she was opposed to, that she was going to refuse to participate in BDS. So you don't have to have a view on BDS to have a view that it's just deeply wrong.
Yeah.
For somebody to lose their job over that. And so I think that's where this gets most serious.
Yeah, and the 2 senators that were consistently critical of the anti-BDS legislation were Dianne Feinstein and Bernie Sanders. I think that this needs to be a conversation, at least in my experience, when I have this conversation with right-wing people, with reactionary people that I talk to, both in my day-to-day or even with commentators and whatnot, they're shocked. They're shocked that this is a thing that already exists in the United States of America far before October 7, and it is only accelerated under the Trump administration, which unfortunately the Biden administration also contributed to by consistently delegitimizing the very valid student protests and encampments that were taking place on college campuses, with the 3,100 arrests that took place specifically on college campuses for students protesting against the state of Israel, calling it an apartheid or calling what Israel is doing a genocide. Even beyond the First Amendment grounds, I think that there's a reason why it only accelerates. There's a reason why issues like this only turn worse and worse under the Trump administration, because the Democrats don't consistently stand on principles on this. And I think that is a real area of concern, because I talked to Ested Herndon from the New York Times the other day, and one of the things that he mentioned to me that is kind of disappointing overall is that Americans don't necessarily care about some of the most damaging aspects of the Trump agenda. And I think that is due to a lack of communication from the Democratic Party that is recentering the attention on these issues, whether it be the First Amendment erosions that are happening with the Trump administration blackbagging students with student visas, and even Mahmoud Khalil with a green card. The process of denaturalization, or the process of revoking his green card is on erroneous claims is completely ridiculous. And also just the deportations as a whole, and the erosion of due process as a whole is not something that the American population is aware of. And I think beyond the tariffs, beyond everything that we've just talked about, the erosion of due process that has a long-standing tradition since the 12th, the 13th century, and is at the underlying heart of liberalism in general. I think it's ridiculous that we're taking that away and it seems like the public is not aware of it. Like that's
Yeah,
terrifying to me.
yeah, no, it's really terrifying. And I think that we should be more clearly calling it out and going on the offense on that issue when we're talking about immigration or when we're talking about public safety. But I also think that it's really important, and we have this really critical moment where we recognize that if we aren't addressing the core economic needs and economic anxieties of the people, then we're just like all these other places that folks read about and think about only happens in a faraway place. You start losing
Yeah,
those civil liberties if at the end of the day, we lost that November election because folks felt like prices going up and their wages being stagnant was a real freaking issue, and we sounded as Democrats like the party of the status quo. And that's at the end of the day. And if you don't make sure that you're listening to how people are feeling and feel like you can actually address the issues of corruption in the economy, baseline for people, then next thing you know, you open up that window where all these things you've had for hundreds of years can start to go away. And I, as somebody who deeply cares about the rights of the vulnerable, about righteous causes that may not be fully popular yet, we don't get to do any of that until we first make sure that we have a broad popular base of voters who believe that we care about their
absolutely.
pocketbooks. And I think that's a big lesson for us.
I'm
Horrible,
definitely, I'm
tragic
100%
lesson.
in agreement there for sure. I do agree. I think that you are better equipped to protect marginalized identities, marginalized communities like trans people, if you already have a bold, progressive, populist agenda that people sign on to, and you can earnestly communicate that and have people believe in your party again. Only after that can you go, all right, Medicare for all means for all. Like, we're not cutting trans people out of this bargain. If you want healthcare, then everyone else is going to get healthcare. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, people would be like, oh yeah, they gave some healthcare to some people where I might have some disagreement, but God, my entire life got way better. So like that's a side complaint. That's like they pulled my grandparents out of poverty and my neighbor's kids entirely out of poverty. And yeah, the asylum program seems maybe a little bit more liberal than I would want it. But like at the end of the day, these are the good guys. I mean, that's where we want to be.
Absolutely. I want to ask you one final question that might be a little tricky, and
okay.
So that's
why I come on here, man. Yeah. I always know you're always going to
two questions. Two questions.
Okay.
First and foremost, this is not the tricky one. First and foremost, the Bernie and AOC, and you've participated in this as well. The Stop Oligarchy tour is great. I've attended it. I plan on attending the Los Angeles rally on April 12th as well. And I think that it's good because it's motivating the Democratic Party to pay attention to this kind of messaging, and it's proving your work, basically, that this kind of populist messaging is something that people want. They want a fighter. They want solutions. I do, however, worry that it kind of falls short of what is necessary for the time right now. And one of the things that I'm advocating for, at least, is that there should be a narrower focus on key issues that we want to either A, help fight against, or B, move messaging in the direction of. And I think that would require organizing beyond just organizing a rally, but then using the organizational capabilities of this movement to direct it at individual problems. Mass demonstrations taking place against the unjustifiable arrest of Mahmoud Khalil, for example. I think that would be a really good way to solidify and single out an issue where there is a serious erosion of the First Amendment, and be able to maybe even deliver some kind of tangible results there to really prove that this kind of popular momentum can get stuff done. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think freeing Mahmoud Khalil is a great organizing principle, and I hope to hear those words repeated over and over again until not only he is freed, but everybody else in his situation is freed. The two messages that I have tried to really focus people on, both at those rallies and through my own messaging, are to save Medicaid as we know it, because it is on the chopping block. Like, they want to end it as we know it in the coming months. And that is a winnable fight. an entirely winnable fight. You just need national pressure and have 3 Republicans out of over 200 of them flip, and we could win that. Just like the Affordable Care Act, which obviously you and I both know how little it is compared to what we want. But since that was saved about 7 years ago, that was a galvanizing moment. Now Medicaid is on chopping block. And then second, firing Elon Musk, which I was told by Republican members of Congress was never going to happen, that he was going to make it through just as long, if not longer, than Trump. Trump's already starting to feel the pressure of how this is politically dragging him down. I think it'd be a huge win if we get Elon Musk fired. And, those are the sorts of organizing principles where I think we got to make a clear demand. And in my view, fire Elon Musk is a great central organizing principle. Saving Medicaid as we know it, great central organizing principle. Of course, freeing Mr. Khalil is a moral imperative. People can have their whole long grocery list, but I think honestly it's not that long, and we can have organizing campaigns around each of them. But to me, it all kind of brings us back to what is the Democratic Party's central organizing principle. And I don't think it can be a laundry list of issues anymore. And back in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, it was breaking that alliance between corporate greed and corrupt government, and saying that at its heart is the problem that we're trying to fix for people. And I think we've got a chance of bringing at least some of that back here in the coming months around any of those campaigns.
Yeah. Okay. So the last question I have for you before we let you go, and thank you so much for coming on, is that there's a New York mayoral race where you endorsed Brad Lander. You've met him before, according to the political reports, at least when you were a council member, and so was he in New York. And I was wondering what the decision making was there, especially considering that there is currently a lot of popular momentum building behind someone who I have supported, someone who I plan on interviewing as well, Zoran Mamdani. And Brad, from what I understand, is also a progressive person as well. It's not, he's not exactly like a conservative either, but I was wondering if there's what was like you, especially as the leader of the Progressive Caucus.
No, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I got a chance to talk with Senator Mamdani the other day, and I wished him a ton of luck and hope people rank him really highly as well. And obviously would be thrilled if he was able to win the mayor's race. I endorsed Brad Lander, who's the controller of the city of New York. So he's a citywide elected official already. And I've worked with Brad for years and years and years, like 10 years. I was elected to the city council here in Austin. First ran when I was 24, started out when I was 25, met Brad when he was a New York city council member. And what's really special about Brad is he is like a generous person in politics. Most people are trying to figure out how relationships and things flow to themselves. He was out there helping make sure that things were better in cities all around the country without taking credit for it. And that's potentially maybe sometimes just political detriment. But, we were working, for example, on making sure that we could pass paid sick days policies in Texas, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, just like the one that he helped get done in New York City. When there were tenants getting evicted in the city of New York, and the big money that was actually behind the private equity fund that was kicking them out was based in Texas, we were coordinating across states. So he's a great guy, very, very progressive, and I think has a real shot at building a winning coalition because he's already a citywide elected official. But the good news is, with ranked choice voting, he doesn't have to be a spoiler to Zoran, and Zoran doesn't have to be a spoiler to Brad. People that support them can rank them as number 1 and number 2, or number 2 and number 1.
And it seems like Zoran has a real shot as well, according to all the polls that I've seen so far, especially because I think everyone, at least every progressive person, every leftist person, even liberals should probably try and make sure that Andrew Cuomo is not the next mayor of New York City.
Yeah, amen to that. And I think it's a great reason for us to, again, in this New York City mayoral race, you've got things like public financing of campaigns, you've got ranked choice voting, and so that creates the opportunity for there to be coalition building, where like you and me don't have to be talking about how your candidate is screwing up the other candidate's shot. I think that they can, and that's part of why I think reforming our electoral system is so key, not just in New York but across the country.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing from you again. Greg Casar, everybody. Is there any final words that you want to impart on people here?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. And I just think for
course.
everybody watching, you got to know, like, we're in a moment. I went and had a town hall in Chip Roy's district, who helped lead the Right Wing Freedom Caucus, and a town of 8,500 people, 400 folks, showed up. So the organizing you're doing can make a real difference. I know, like, the last few months, people are like, what should I do? Does this make a difference? These phone calls, these town halls, these marches, this organizing you can do at your workplace, it makes it a real difference. We're in a moment right now where we can transform and reshape the Democratic Party, where we can change the boundaries of all this. But we got to think about speaking to a broad set of people.
Oh, okay.
And I think we got a
I
real
do have a
shot to
question.
do it.
I have another question. I can't believe I didn't ask you about this.
There we go. See, you give me a little space to drag on, and here we go.
No, Trump's tariffs. So the UAW has come
we're in
out.
tariff world now.
Yeah, UAW has come out in support of it. I love Sean Fain. I understand where they're coming from in terms of like trade protectionist policies. It does feel like this is another moment for the Democrats where I hope that they message in this moment in the appropriate way, where they don't come out as like unrestricted free trade supporters, which is precisely the reason why Donald Trump was able to carry over that resentment against the Clinton brand in 2016, where a lot of the working class that lost their jobs due to NAFTA truly despise this brand of Democratic Party politics. And while Trump is, of course, going in this direction in the most haphazard way possible, there needs to be a industrial base built here before any sort of trade protectionism could take place. And obviously, these tariffs are going to increase the cost of living, the cost of all goods, and it's going to have truly harmful effects. I do hope that the Democratic Party position overall is not, we have to protect free trade, because I feel like that in and of itself is going to that in and of itself is not going to be a popular message. What do you think about that?
That's what Trump wants Democrats to do. He wants Democrats to just be the anti-Trump party. So then just go back into as much Clintonism as possible, which sounds like we don't care about having American jobs here. We can't do that.
Yeah.
What we should say is, tariffs are a powerful tool. They're like a scalpel. And what Trump is going and doing is the equivalent of using a chainsaw for brain surgery. I mean, like, as you pointed out, it's reckless. He's going to raise prices, and he doesn't care about bringing American jobs home or about, the American worker
or good benefits in good paying American jobs, especially, which is something that the UAW stressed when considering, of course, the fact that he is removing the collective bargaining power from 1 million plus federal employees right now.
Yeah, he basically just wiped out collective bargaining for 1.5 million people, and that should be a central rallying cry for our party. And frankly, I think he needs to be talking a lot more about that. He just got rid of the minimum wage of $17 an hour for federal contractors. So, essentially, look, we're gonna see with these tariffs is you're just wait to see the lobbyists coming and cashing in to get their exemptions. To have the foreign leaders of foreign nations going to Jared Kushner and Eric Trump and making an investment deal, and suddenly they're off the hook. I mean, at the end of the day, this is all about Trump and the corrupt folks making more money, not about bringing American jobs home. And that's where we got to go. And here's I think the last bit of news of the week here, alongside the tariffs. For my parting words are, Democrats used to cozy up to folks like Mark Zuckerberg because they thought he was on their side, but he was always a problem. He was always a monopolist, always screwing workers and consumers. He shouldn't be controlling the information that we all get. And as soon as Trump's in office, right, he goes and cuts a $25 million Zuckerberg settlement with Trump, $25 million in cash to Trump. And now he's got multiple meetings at the Oval Office. He's trying to get rid of his anti-monopoly lawsuit. So this is the moment where Democrats need to say, we're breaking with those guys. those are the guys that are going to be cutting Trump the check. The tariffs can work, but this is actually all part right now of the Trump cashing in grift.
It's a sales tax.
We got
with a nefarious purpose. It's a sales tax, and they want to cut the last remaining progressive taxation structure we have in this country, and they want to make the working poor foot the bill by implementing this.
Costs are going to go up from these things. Trump promised voters, whether they're voting for him or not, that he's going to bring down costs. And all Trump's been trying to figure out is how to bring down another check for himself for a billionaire tax break. And we'll see if I'll be pushing, my party to adopt that sort of message. But honestly, the people speaking out and responding to that message makes a big difference, because if we can get folks to run for the House on that kind of message and win some of these tough seats, then you'll have folks running for president on that kind of message. And what Trump did is he transformed the entire Republican Party from a Mitt Romney-style party to the Trump-style party by virtue of winning the voters in a presidential campaign. And my hope is that there are real Democratic presidential candidates that take this kind of message we've been talking about and have the kind of transformation the Democratic Party needs for the Democratic Party's existence and, frankly, just for the good of the entire world. So I'll leave it at that with you, but it's always good to hang out with you here and the folks that watch.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Right. Take care.
Have a good one. That was Greg Casar, ladies and gentlemen, text 35. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I hope it was informative, instructive, enlightening. Yes, you now have freedom, chat. You can now have the freedom to chirp again. You have to put it in emote mode.